Essentially all products sold in the EU, the US, the UK and so on are covered by labeling requirements to some extent. And the challenge is often to identify the labeling requirements that apply to the product and to the packaging. And in this video, I will demonstrate the methodology that we use when we identify labeling requirements for a certain product. And then you can do the same. So let's say that I intend to sell this plush toy in the United States. The first thing I need to do is to classify the product, because labeling requirements, they do not exist in isolation, but they depend on regulations and other requirements that exist in a certain market, say the United States. It can also be a matter of the age group. So I'm selling a children's product in this case. But let's say you sell food contact materials, eyewear, furniture, art materials and so on. They all tend to come with their own labeling requirements. The same can be said about textiles, footwear, electronics, batteries. Even if you make certain claims about a product being, say, recyclable, something like that, or containing a pesticide. But I'm not going to make this overly complicated. But let's imagine that the plush toy come in some sort of packaging, which is quite likely. So I'm just going to move forward here. Now I need to set, let's say, more detailed parameters that in turn impact the labeling requirements. This could be, say, small parts, or if it comes in a plastic bag. Or even if I intend to claim that the product is made in the United States, and there are certain conditions for that. Okay? So what I'm doing now is creating the requirements list, and this is my starting point. This is my starting point to identify labeling requirements. Now, CPSIA, this is where I will begin. And what I can see here in this summary, okay, is that there are certain choking hazard warning labeling that apply. Okay, if I scroll down, I also see I need a tracking label. I need the manufacturer private label, a name, location and date of production, detailed information about the manufacturing process, such as batch or run number. Okay, so here we got a set of labeling requirements, some of which are conditional. And what I need to do now is that as I'm going through, as I am identifying the labeling requirements, I need to start working on, my label files. The information that will actually be printed on the product, the packaging, or maybe both. Okay, so this is a label file I created specifically for CPSIA. Right, so you can see the importer, manufacturing location, manufacturing date, batch number. Okay, so let's say that I have now satisfied the labeling requirements under the CPSIA. Then I need to move on to the next one, next set of labeling requirements. And if certain conditions apply, I will also need to include this warning text. You may actually have seen this. Choking hazard, small parts, not for children under 3 years. And then there are certain other labeling requirements. This is just an example. Not all of these contain labeling requirements. Sometimes they do, but in most cases, I would say. As you can see here, and under packaging, we also have a set of labeling requirements that apply specifically to the packaging, which I then have to make sure that I not only cover labeling requirements of CPSIA, but also take the other parts into consideration, such as 16 CFR Part 1551 and the UPLR, the Uniform Packaging and Labeling Regulation, the FPLA. I'm not going to go into detail of all of these. That would be a very long video. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate a methodology, right? But I need to just be clear that labeling requirements stack, meaning that when I'm creating a label file, I need to consider all the labeling requirements that apply. And very often they overlap. As you can see here, under FPLA, you're going to see that you need to declare the identity, the declaration of responsibility, the name of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor, and the address. And that is something I'm already covering as part of CPSAA. Now, maybe not entirely, but very often labeling requirements overlap. Then you have very specific labeling requirements, such as the bag suffocation warnings. If it comes in a bag, you need to you need to make sure that there's certain text that's printed on the packaging, on the plastic bag. Then there are labeling requirements that apply to essentially all consumer products in a certain country. And in the case of the United States, it's essentially always mandatory to print the country of origin. And if it's a product that's made in Mexico, then you specify that as made in Mexico. If it's made in China, then that's made in China, and so on. Okay. So in this case, I would need to actually add to this, and I would write made somewhere. Okay. You can continue to build on the label file to make sure that you include all the labeling requirements that apply. Now, in some cases, there can be conditions, like further conditions, to use certain statements. And one good example would be that of made in USA labeling. So it relates to country of origin, but the point here is that in order to claim that something is made in the United States for products sold in the United States, then there are certain conditions that must be fulfilled to make sure that products are not merely, let's say, repacked or something like that in the US, or then claimed to be made in the USA. Okay. So clearly I cannot cover all labeling requirements that apply in the US, the EU, and so on this video, but in short, the way you need to approach this is not necessarily to go straight to identifying labeling requirements, but actually look at all the different regulations and so on that may apply to your product. So you need to do let's say an assessment, a classification from scratch, and only then can you look at the specific requirements under each one of these and see what is actually said about labeling of the product. And once that is done, you can get to work on your label file, make sure that's sent to the manufacturer. Another thing to consider is, of course, that of placement. You have to make sure that you also read up on where a certain label item should be placed. In some cases, it only concerns the packaging, as you can see here. In other cases, you need to take labeling. You need to make sure that the label is actually printed on the product itself. Different requirements come with different placement, placements. So that's everything I have to say in this video. If you have questions, you can write a comment.